There's an L.
All right. Kelly, we're on live streaming.
Yes, you're now live streaming.
Okay, fantastic. Good. So, good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us on our last Thursday night nature talk for the season. My name is Harry Vogel, and I am the Senior Biologist and Director of the Loon Preservation Committee. And it's my pleasure this evening to introduce John Rockwood, an outstanding loon photographer and videographer and a valued LPC member and volunteer for many years. John has been our eyes and ears on Massabesic Lake in southern New Hampshire since the early 2000s. He's taken photographs for many years. He's even published a book, Adventures with Grapenut, which we are happy to carry here in our store at the Loon Center and in our online store as well. More recently, John has been shooting video of loons as well, and I'm looking forward, as I do every year, to seeing his presentation. And after John's presentation, I'm going to talk for a little while about LPC's work for New Hampshire's loons this year. So, John, I will hand it right over to you.
Okay, thank you, Harry.
I listened to the photos.
All right. All right, to begin with, most of my loons have been, the photos and videos are taken from a kayak. This time of year, we start seeing the males gathering on Lake Massabesic. On Massabesic, there tends to be 7 to 8 pairs, and they'll visit with each other every morning. This particular morning, I got there first, and they weren't quite sure if they were inviting me or not. Now, the females, for some reason, aren't invited. Lake Massabesic is 2 halves, approximately 1,250 acres apiece. At this point, they threw me out of the meeting. Now, Lake Massabesic has a pair of eagles, along with at least 2 juveniles that harass the loons. This was a different morning, and there were 2 loons flying around, and the males weren't happy. They should be, I'm not hearing their sound, to tell you the truth. But they're yodeling, and they're letting their mates and the rest of the loons know that there is an eagle flying around. Again, I'm not quite sure why we lost the sound. All right, as I say, we may be without our sound. The sound was going to be them yodeling. A few would yodel, and most were tremoloing. I'm sorry about that. I know we've tested this 3 or 4 times, and it worked every time, and for some reason we're out of sound. This is Grapenut's mother. I knew her for between 12 and 15 years at this point. She liked to play with me most mornings and just about land in my kayak when she saw me. Again, this is me. This is her coming in on the left. One of the photographers was nice enough to send me 2 pictures. Another eagle, as I say, we have quite a few in southern New Hampshire these days. This is Pawtuckaway Lake. This is their northern pair. There are 2 pairs on their lake. They had 1 chick that year. They saw the eagle fly by. They were both tremoloing at this point. A little one peeking out. They were both tremoloing. We'll point out when the male does his yodeling. You'll see that later on. Again, another eagle. This was at Pawtuckaway. At this point, I was looking at my video that I had shot and happened to look up, and I now had company. They were still worried about the eagle. Here's the little one. Again, please don't chase loons. If you're sitting somewhere on the lake and they come up to you, there is a reason. Usually they're trying to hide from an enemy. Again, please do not harass them or reach for them or use a flash to take their picture. The little one's on the female's back. Again, the only way I know male from female is this pair happens to be banded. I normally start on the lakes around 5 in the morning. I tend to be the only one there on weekdays. Weekends, I tend to be late at 5 in the morning. This particular video camera can go up to 90 times magnification. Now we cut out about half an hour of them napping next to my kayak. And at this point, they go on their merry way. The eagle has flown back to harass the southern pair on Pawtuckaway. We're back to Lake Massabesic. When they use the east-west runway, the airplanes come down low. And the male is yodeling. He does not like the planes. He doesn't understand the planes. The female will tremolo while he's yodeling. Again, I apologize. I don't know how we lost the sound. We've tested this 6 ways to Sunday, and the sound always worked. And this is a male stretching out his neck, almost puts his bill in the water. Feeding time. The female is wailing. Of course, you can't hear it. She's calling for her mate.
Hey, John, it seems like we've lost your audio.
Chris, are you watching this by any chance? Well, I gave you the link. Just click on it. It's the incredible photography.
Great.
John, I'm sorry, we still don't seem to have your audio. There's a suggestion in the chat that you might need to leave the meeting and sign back in to get it back.
Well, everybody, we apologize for the problems with the video, but I did see somebody on the chat say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, and there we go. So as far as those pictures and the video, it was a great show, even without loon sounds and even without narration sounds. I guess we just had to be zen and take that all in. So, and John, I'm wondering if you could end screen sharing, and then I will start to share my screen, and we'll get into a little bit about Loon Preservation Committee's work for the loons this season. All right, there we go. Let's see. We can't bring this up. Okay. Share the screen. All right. Okay. Well, folks, sorry again about the video, but let's move on. And thank you, John. We'll have you back again next year. We'll have video things figured out at that point. And sometimes, right, I like to imagine just leaping forward a week and being able to talk about things that happened a week ago and being able to kind of say, well, wasn't that a thing? We have a good story to tell. Sometimes you may need a little bit longer as well, but in any case, good. So, so thank you everybody for being here. This evening, I'd like to talk a little bit about LPC's work this summer to help us, our loons cope with some of the challenges that they're facing, and also present some preliminary results to give folks a sense of what kind of a year it was for loons here in New Hampshire. So to start at the beginning, Loon Preservation Committee was created in 1975 because people had noticed that loons were becoming less common on our lakes. And the thinking at that point was that if human activities had contributed to those declines, and it seemed pretty likely that they had, then human activities, if they were coordinated and thoughtful, could reverse those declines once again. And that's the hope and the philosophy on which the Loon Preservation Committee was created. Our mission is to restore and maintain a healthy population of loons throughout the state, to monitor the health and the productivity of loons and loon populations as indicators of environmental health, the quality of our lakes and ponds, and to promote a greater understanding and a wider appreciation of loons in the larger natural world. The Loon Center here in Moultonborough is our headquarters and visitor center, but LPC carries out programs of monitoring and research and management and education throughout the entire state. And we're helped in those efforts by close to 1,000 volunteers throughout the state. Here are a number of those volunteers at a raft and sign building day this April at the Loon Center. And we also have a small but dedicated staff. So every year we hire a number of seasonal field biologists to help us carry out our work across the state. This is our lineup for 2022. And together our members and volunteers and staff do several things. And the first thing that we do is we count loons. And counting loons gives us our first indication of problems with our loon population. It's also the ultimate measure of our success in trying to keep these birds common. So we've been monitoring loons since 1975, and over that span of years, we have actually created the longest running and the most comprehensive database of loon populations and productivity that exists anywhere in the world right here in New Hampshire. So here is our Lakes Region West biologist, Jaden Jack, looking for loons this year on Chalk Pond. Sometimes on our bigger lakes, we get some help in the form of a boat ride from one of our volunteers. Here are LPC's outreach intern, Kayla Hodges and Jaden, monitoring in style on our volunteer Dennis Gould's boat on Ossipee Lake. This year, LPC volunteers and staff monitored 358 lakes throughout the state. And not all of those lakes have loons, but all of them have the potential to have loons. We hope that more of them will have loons in the future. So we deal with that large number of lakes by carving the state up into these different monitoring regions. And then we have one biologist each on our 3 largest lakes, Winnipesaukee and Squam. And we have, in recent years, we've been working with a biologist at the Umbagog National Wildlife Refuge to monitor lakes up on Umbagog. This year, we actually carved the state of the lakes region, monitoring region up a little bit further. We had a lakes region west and east biologist, and we also carved out a Pemigewasset region out of that area as well. And happily, that's because we have more loons now to monitor. Less happily, it's because those loons are facing increasing challenges. And of course, it's one thing to say that loon populations are increasing or decreasing, but we also want to know what are the factors that are contributing to those changes. And so we do research of various kinds. And banding loons is one of those research activities. Here is our volunteer and outreach biologist, Caroline Hughes, measuring a loon on Lake Wickwass for bands this summer. And we band loons because despite their popularity, there's still an awful lot that we don't know about these birds. So even some pretty basic aspects of loon biology and life history, such as how long do loons live? Do they mate for life? Do they come back to the same lake year after year after year? What's their age at first reproduction? What's their reproductive output over their lifetimes? Do the chicks come back to the same lake or the same general area on which they were born? Where do our loons go in the wintertime? And what are the migratory pathways that they use to get back and forth? All of those things were, until pretty recently, either unknown or based on pretty limited data. And this is information that we feel we need to have in order to assure these birds of a good future in our state. So every loon that we ban gets an individual combination of bands. So there's only one loon anywhere in New Hampshire or in North America, for that matter, that has, say, a silver over orange on one leg and a blue dot over a red stripe on the other. And once we have that loon banded, we know that loon now is an individual, and we can begin to follow them over their lifetime. So here's the female loon on Kalelemuk Lake sporting her new bands this summer. This year so far, we spent 19 nights banding and banded 44 loons. As long as we have a loon in the hand, we take a small sample of blood. We test that blood for lead, for other contaminants, for stress indicating hormones, for blood parasites. We can look at liver and kidney function of that blood. We can do genetics work as well. So we can learn an awful lot about that loon and its health just by taking that small sample of blood. And here's Pemigewasset biologist Taylor Tewksbury drawing a sample of blood from a loon on Lake Wickwass this summer. We also clip a couple of feathers. We test those feathers for mercury. In the past, we've tested them for cyanobacteria toxins. We can do genetics work on the feathers as well. And here's that same Wickwass loon about to give up a feather for science. And we also collect inviable loon eggs from failed nests. And so here is Seacoast Region biologist Will Hine collecting loon eggs from the raft on Half Moon Lake this summer. These are 2 of 74 eggs that we collected from failed nests in 2022. We'll test some of those eggs for mercury and some for a wide range of other contaminants. Here's Danielle Lampy from the Umbagog National Wildlife Refuge taking some measurements of an inviable egg collected from Lake Umbagog before she logs it into LPC's freezer. We also work to rescue loons in distress, and those rescues began early this year as we found 10 loons trapped in a small pool of open water on the Broads in Winnipesaukee in January. Warm weather and open water meant that these loons had stayed on Winnipesaukee too long. And by the time we found them, they were into their winter wing feather molt, which meant that they could not fly to escape the ice closing in. The first day we went out to try and capture them, we couldn't catch any of them because the water was still too vast in extent. The ice hadn't closed in. But after a cold night, that ice did close in on them, and we tried again, and then we caught each one of them in turn. So here are Squam Lakes biologist Tiffany Grotti, senior biologist John Cooley, and Caroline untangling one of those caught loons. And that turned into a long day on Winnipesaukee. And then we had to drag those containers full of loons more than a mile back to shore. And then began a long night of checking those loons for health. So here is John testing the blood of those loons for lead. From here, they went to the Caves Veterinary Clinic in Concord for x-rays and additional health workups. And then they went to wildlife rehabilitator Maria Colby for rehab and feeding. And then we were able to release all 10 of those to the ocean. So here's one of these birds being released by Maria and Tiffany. Those rescues continued through the year. Here is our Sunapee region biologist, Phil Keefe, and John, about to release a loon rescued from a small stream in Newbury. And here's Jaden releasing an injured loon rescued on Wakiwan Lake. So in total, we have rescued 32 loons to date this year, and there will be more before the year is through. Not all of our rescued loons can be released again. Our less fortunate loons have historically gone to Dr. Mark Pokris, a veterinarian at the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine at Tufts University. One of the best ways of finding out what's affecting loons at a population level is to find out what's killing individual birds. And so we've been sending dead loons to Mark since about the mid-1980s, and he's been telling us what they died of. So this is, for example, how we found out about the issue of lead tackle in our birds. And Mark retired a number of years ago now, but not really. He's continued to help us. And one of the many ways that Mark continues to help is by sending great veterinary students our way. So here's Tony Rabasco doing a necropsy this summer in our newly upgraded research laboratory at the Loon Center. This is one of the loons that sadly ended up on our necropsy table this summer. This poor loon was picked up on Round Pond in Pittsburgh. He had swallowed a lead sinker. We tested his blood, and he had a lead blood level above 60 micrograms per deciliter, which is about 3 times the lethal limit. And so sadly, we had to euthanize this bird. And there's a lead sinker that killed him, circled in red on this radiograph. Lead fishing tackle continues to be the largest source of known adult loon mortalities in New Hampshire. So far this year, we've had 4 lead poisoned loons, which is 4 too many, but fewer than we've collected at this point in many other years. This is the 5th year of our lead tackle buyback program to give $10 vouchers to people who hand in old lead tackle at participating tackle shops so they can buy loon-safe, non-toxic tackle. This is the 2nd year we've sweetened that deal. And so now the people who give the largest or hand in the largest haul of tackle at each one of these participating tackle shops, Loon Preservation Committee is going to send them a check for $100. People who give the second highest total of tally, they'll get a check for $50. So we're serious about getting this lead out of our lakes and out of our loons. Please visit loonsafe.org for details and a list of retailers that are participating in that program. So far, we've collected over 30,000 pieces of lead tackle through this program. So here is our lead tackle display at the New Hampshire Lakes Congress this summer. We also work in other ways to minimize human impacts on loons. So we will float nesting rafts to help loons that have been displaced from their traditional nesting sites because of shoreline development. These rafts also help loons on lakes with changing water levels because they float, so they go up and down as water levels change. Here are Caroline and our Winnipesaukee biologist, Ashley Keenan, floating a raft on Roberts Cove on Winnipesaukee this spring. And this year, LPC staff and volunteers floated 137 nesting rafts on lakes throughout the state, which is by far a new record. Here are LPC trustee and former chair, Kristen Bigor, and volunteer Dave Beardsley floating a raft on Lake Sunapee this spring. And those rafts were successful. 1 out of every 5 chicks hatched in the state this year came from a raft floated by LPC. Here's Will Hine checking on a raft on Bull Lake this summer. And we also float signs and rope lines around nesting loons to give them a little bit of the space that they need to be able to incubate those eggs and hatch their chicks successfully. Here is Kayla building a sign to put out on our lakes. We protected 142 nesting pairs with signs this year, which is a new record as well. Here is Taylor floating a sign the hard way on Lake Winnisquam. And pairs protected by signs hatched 1 out of every 2 chicks hatched in the state. So here are volunteer Mark Hemingway and Jaden putting out signs on Winona Lake this summer. And once the chicks are hatched, we'll sometimes float these caution loon chick signs to slow down boat traffic in brooding areas. This is Tiffany Grotti, our Squam Lakes biologist, floating one of those signs on Squam. Tiffany and LPC were able to continue our work to understand and reverse the declines of loons on Squam Lake, thanks to the generous support of donors to our Squam Lake Loon Initiative. And we're confident that every loon benefited from our educational efforts. And those included new educational signs posted at access points of lakes. And we gave in-person talks at lake associations and other venues and right here at the Loon Center. So here is Kayla giving one of those presentations. Caroline and Kayla also led guided loon watching paddles on many lakes. So far this year, we've given 127 in-person talks and paddles. Caroline has continued to expand the Loon Preservation Committee website. We have a lot of information there now on loon natural history, including the calls of loons and loon behavior. And we have information about our work in support of loons. So please do check us out at loon.org. This is the 9th year for LPC's Loon webcam. We had over 150,000 views and over 50,000 chat messages from people all over the United States and the world. LPC super volunteer Bill Gassman and a number of other outstanding volunteers and LPC staff all put in a huge effort to broadcast 2 nesting pairs of loons to the world. Caroline continues to publish the LPC e-newsletter, and that now goes out to over 5,800 people. She also updates our Facebook page. We have over 9,000 followers and growing. Chris Conrad brings his unique style and his insights on loons to our Twitter account that has grown to over 500 followers. And our Instagram account has over 1,000 followers. So we've been working hard to get the word out in different ways this year. And we were back to giving our Thursday night nature talk series in person, mostly here at the Loon Center. And we also, for the most part, broadcast those talks live on our YouTube channel. And it turns out it is surprisingly difficult to do both of those things at once and well. We also have a number of events to celebrate loons and our fascination with them. So the 3rd Saturday of July is an important day for loons in New Hampshire. It starts with our loon census, which is our annual effort to get as many people as we can out on the lakes counting loons from 8 to 9 a.m. Here's Austin Coolidge, probably one of our youngest census participants, looking for loons on Ware Reservoir this year. We had 458 people and at least 1 Labrador take part in that fine tradition. They counted 546 loon adults and chicks, and those figures are rolled up into our season-long monitoring. And then starting at 10 o'clock that same day, after 2 years off, we had our Loon Festival again. Our good friends at Meredith Rotary were there with free hot dogs and ice cream for everybody. We gave loon talks in the garage of our new Kitty and John Wilson Field Operations Center. You can even dunk a biologist if you answered a loon question correctly, or even if you couldn't, but contributed $1 to the cause. So it's been a busy and challenging year. And like all nonprofits, we rely on our volunteers to help us in our work. So this is a good time for me to say thank you to all of our volunteers and supporters for your help this year. We could not do this work without you. And soon enough, it was time to pull our rafts and signs off the water again to wait for another spring and another loon breeding season. And then take all of that data that we had collected over the course of the summer and enter it into LPC's database. So that is not exciting work, but it is important. This year, we entered a 47th year of data on loons and our work to preserve them into that database. And here's the results of those efforts. And I have much good news to share. So in 2022, we had more than 5 times the number of paired loons as we did when we began our work back in 1975. And a paired loon is simply a loon that pairs up with another loon that defends a lake or an area of water and has at least the potential to breed and to contribute to that next generation of loons. So we continued our upward climb in that parameter to set a new record of over 340 loon pairs. And again, these are still just preliminary numbers. Only a proportion of those territorial nesting pair or territorial pairs breed. And so that is the number of our nesting adults. That's the black line. That was also up from last year. And chicks hatch and chicks surviving were both up strongly. So all 4 actually of those statistics set new records this year. And as nice as it is to see a good year, to see continued growth in our loon population, we still have a long way to go to reach the historical levels, the levels at which we feel loons inhabited our lakes historically, and the levels we would like to get back to again in order to be able to call this a truly recovered loon population. If we go a little deeper into that data, we get these relative reproductive success parameters. And so the blue line on this graph is the proportion of territorial pairs that nested. So about 70% of territorial pairs got down to the business of nesting, and that's about right on the long-term average. The red line is our hatching success. This year, we are above 1 chick hatched per nesting pair, and that is one of the better results that we have seen, at least in recent years. And the green line is chick survival. And there as well, over 70% of chicks hatched survived until this point in the summer. And that again is about average for the long term. If you put all those trends together, you get this blue line, chicks surviving per territorial pair. And the red line in this graph is 0.48 chicks surviving per territorial pair. And that is the number that we know from research done by the Loon Preservation Committee and by other organizations that we need to hit as often as not if we want to maintain our loon population here in the state. And of course, we want to do more than just maintain. We want to continue the recovery of these birds. In 2022, happy to say that we were back above that line. So this is an important graph because the periods in our history where we've experienced the strongest growth, they can relate to those years on this graph where we spent a good number of years well above that red line. So that's the early and the mid 2000s as one example. Lately, it's been harder to stay above that line. And so our concern as we look at the more recent years on this graph is that as we continue to lose adult loons from monofilament, from lead ingestion, from collisions with boats or jet skis, or even just from natural causes, where are the chicks going to be coming from to replace those loons that we have lost? And, you know, the good news in this graph is that we have been at or above that red line for 6 of the past 10 years. So this year, 59% of loon nests were successful. And that's actually quite a bit better than last year. Some of those nests resulted in only 1 chick, and so that's success light, but it's still success, and we'll take it. But a good number, more than usual, hatched 2 chicks, and that's what really made the difference this year. Of the nests that failed, a good half of those are simply unknown. So nest failures happen in the blink of an eye, and unless we have human eyes or a camera or a video camera trained on that nest, often we simply don't know the reason for that nest failure. But of known causes of nest failure, we humans play a role in most. So human disturbance is obvious. This is just people getting too close to loons on the nest, incubating their eggs and flushing those loons off the nest and leaving those eggs exposed to the elements. Many predations may have a human component as well, because populations of egg predators like raccoons and gulls have benefited from their association with people. So they've been fruitful, they multiplied, and their populations are now at unnaturally high levels, which puts stress on our native loons and other wildlife. And some of those predations may well have happened after humans flushed a loon off of the nest. We bear some responsibility for floodings and strandings and wakes as well, because many of our lakes are impounded. They have dams which control lake water levels, and not always all that well if you're a loon that nests right at the water's edge. And of course, we humans, we love to pave things. And so as these rain events become stronger, that rain, as it hits the ground, instead of soaking into that ground, will slew us over asphalt or other impermeable surfaces and go right into our lakes and cause a rapid increase in water levels on those lakes. And then the waves from boats and these new wake boats can also flood a loon nest or wash an egg right out of the nest. So what accounted for that good breeding success this year? So, well, we set new records for management across the board, and that certainly helped. And we also got a break from the weather. So the benefit of having a long-term data set like the one that LPC is, has and is the steward of, is that we have data on loon nesting success in hot summers, cool summers, wet summers, dry summers, summers with heat waves, summers with significant rain events. And that's how we know, for example, that loons have trouble achieving that 0.48 chicks surviving per territorial pair if they've been subjected to very high temperatures, or for that matter, to significant rain events as well. So last year, our nesting loons had to endure the hottest June on record, which was followed by the wettest July. Both of those things were really bad for a northern species that nests at the water's edge. This year, things were a little cooler and a little drier, and loons took advantage of that and had a good year. So we're continuing to research climate change impacts, including management options to help our loons cope with rising temperatures and with storm events. So to wrap up, for our volunteers and staff, it was a summer of good work to benefit our loons. Sometimes under beautiful blue skies, and sometimes not. We had our share of bugs and wind and rain and other challenges this summer, as we do every summer. Our awesome field crew remained happy and upbeat through it all. They found some joy in simple pleasures like a trip to Burger King at the end of a long day, and even an occasional home-cooked meal at our new Wilson Center field house, complete with Jaden's Midwestern hot dish. Our staff worked hard, and it was good and necessary work for our loons. And of course, there's still much work to be done. And the impacts of LPC's work go far beyond loons and far beyond New Hampshire. Loons are a sentinel of environmental quality. They're an indicator of the health of our aquatic ecosystems. They're scientifically important and they have a wide public appeal. And that is why they have found themselves to be a focal point to so many of these environmental issues. And that means that if we can save loons, then we can save a lot of other species that depend on the same clean water and quiet places. And I like to think that at the same time as we've been working to recover our loon population, we've also been working to encourage an environmental ethic. And ultimately, that's going to benefit not just loons, but also other wildlife and even the people and the economy of New Hampshire, because after all, it's a large part of the reason why people choose to visit or live here. And here's what it's all for. So here is the Purity Lake male, one of the Winnipesaukee 10 that we rescued from the ice on Winnie in January, with his mate and 2 chicks this summer. So may the future be bright for those little loons and all of the others born on our lakes this year. That is the end of my presentation. I would love to answer other questions if people have them about loons or about LPC's work in support of loons this summer.
So there already are some questions in the chat, and if anyone else has questions, please do put them in there. Harry, the first question we have here for you is about the impact of eagles on loons. And so the specific question is, how many adult loons, chicks, and eggs do we lose each year to eagles?
Yes, great. Well, so this is a great question. The Loon Preservation Committee has a technical committee that's made up of experts in various different fields. And one of the folks that is on that technical committee is Chris Martin, who is actually the eagle biologist at New Hampshire Audubon. And one of the wonderful things about having relationships with different biologists, loon biologists and eagle biologists, is that we can take the databases of loons and eagles and put them together. So that's exactly what we did. What we looked at was we were trying to find out if there was a significant difference in loon breeding success if they were within a certain distance. I think it might have been 5 or 8 miles of an active eagle nest. And we did in fact find a significant difference, but it was a very small difference. I couldn't tell you exactly how many eggs have been predated by eagles or how many chicks have been predated by eagles. Again, nest failures and chick predations happen in the blink of an eye. I think that eagles, frankly, get a bad rap because I think that we suspect, or we get many more reports of loon chicks being predated by eagles than actually are predated. And we know that because every once in a while we'll get a frantic call to say an eagle came down and it took one of the loon chicks from the water because people saw that there was a splash in that water. We'll send a biologist out there immediately, and he or she will report both chicks are still there. So if we have loons that are experienced adults, loons and eagles have lived together for millions of years, and so they have learned to cope with each other, and loons have learned how to be successful even in the presence of eagles. So yes, an eagle will take an occasional loon egg, it will take a loon chick. Every once in a while, it might even take an adult loon, and well, that's much more happens much more often in the Midwest, where their loons are only about half to 2/3 the size of our much bigger loons here in the Northeast. But all of those impacts pale in comparison of any one of various human impacts on loons.
I have one more question from Zoom chat, and then I know Kelly has at least a couple from the YouTube chat. So the Zoom chat question is, does LPC have a stance on wake boats, or are we doing any work on that?
Yeah. So I have to say, we're not a huge fan of wake boats here at Loon Preservation Committee. One of the issues, of course, is that if you have a bird that nests at the water's edge, loons can be vulnerable to wakes, especially these large wakes that are being thrown up by wake boats. And we are beginning now to track loon nests that have failed directly as a result of wake boats and various kinds of boats. And this is something, again, we, along with New Hampshire Lakes Association, we were supporting efforts to study the effects of these wake boats, both on loons and in terms of roiling up the bottom of sediments on lakes, and maybe putting more phosphorus into the water as well. For all we know, that could be an issue in terms of the increasing number of cyanobacteria blooms on our lakes as well. So wakes from boats, and not just wake boats, but other boats as well, can be pretty destructive. And that's why we have no wake zones on lakes. But what we found, essentially, there's some good research out now by a number of independent researchers that have shown, I think, pretty definitively that these much larger wakes from wake boats demand a longer setback, or a longer, or a more of a no wake zone, perhaps extending that to 250 or 500 feet. And so if folks have wake boats, and I appreciate the desire to be out there and recreating on the water, but there's probably the more suitable places for those to happen is very far from shores, and especially any kind of shores that may have nesting loons on them. Kelly, did you say that there was some YouTube?
I do indeed have some stuff from YouTube.
Okay.
I'm going to kind of go in not necessarily in the order they came in, but in order of probably the length of answer.
Okay.
And the first one is, does LPC necropsy all deceased or euthanized loons?
Yes, the answer is yes, we do. And in the past, again, we were sending those out to Mark Pokris. More recently, as Mark, as I had mentioned, sends great veterinary students our way. And so every year we have had the good fortune to have at least one, and sometimes even two, veterinary interns at the Loon Preservation Committee, and our staff as well. So John and Caroline have both been trained up, by working with Mark and by seeing, sadly, many loon necropsies over the years. And so they are now very well qualified as well to being these doing these loon necropsies. And so the result of that is that we can necropsy every loon that we have turned into the Loon Center.
Okay, the next question is, I'm just going to read it directly because it just makes more sense that way. It seems like there has been near constant building / construction around New Hampshire's lakes. Does that affect or does that impact the loons?
Yes, yeah, that's a good question, and it can impact loons in several ways. And so as we develop our shorelines, we can displace loons from their traditional historical nesting sites. And often there's things that go along with an increased development of shorelines. One of those, of course, being increased recreational use of lakes as well. And the good news here is that shoreline development can be done in a way that is less impactful to loons, to other wildlife, and to water quality as well, by keeping shoreline buffers and things of that nature. Loons are a threatened species in New Hampshire, and so we work closely with New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services and New Hampshire Fish and Game. They will actually alert us when there is an effort to do shoreline development that would imperil a loon nest that we know there's a nesting site there, and we have an opportunity to comment on that and see if there are ways to mitigate some of that potential harm to our nesting loons as well. And of course, recreational use of lakes. The all important thing is to maintain distance from these loons, and so these are wild animals. And at all costs, we want to maintain, we usually say a minimum of 150 feet from these loons. More if they vocalize or move away or show any signs of distress. Certainly you don't want to be moving towards these loons if they're doing any of those behaviors. And John Rockwood and I have talked about this, many times. And frankly, those loons that you see so close to John's kayak, that has never been because John has boated up to them. It's because he has been stationary and those loons have approached him. And those loons, John has been with these loons, as he was mentioning, sadly, before the sound cut out, he has known some of these loons for decades. So over an incredible amount of time of daily trips out on these lakes, the loons have come to recognize that John is not a threat. And that is why you see some of these chicks that are really close to these kayaks, and it always makes us at the Loon Preservation Committee, cringe a little bit as we see those. But we always have to remember that these loons were approaching John. They were not, John was not approaching the loons. And again, he has those decades of daily experience with these loons, and that is really what it takes to achieve that level of comfort with these birds. So yes, I mean, they have both shoreline development and the things that go with shoreline development have the potential to cause harm to loons. But if they're done correctly, we can minimize and largely mitigate a lot of that harm.
And the last question I have is someone wanted an update on the families of loon cam 1 and 2.
Oh, so that's one. So my understanding, and Caroline, you'll have to chime in here if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that all 4 of the chicks that hatched from Loon Cam 1 and Loon Cam 2 are still surviving and thriving, which would in fact be a great result. Caroline, can you, I hope, confirm that?
So sadly, we did lose one of the chicks from Loon Cam 2 about a week after the hatch, but the remaining chick there is doing really well. And the 2 chicks from Loon Cam 1 are surviving as well. We just went there today to pull the raft and got a glimpse of those 2 chicks. So yeah, so
right.
3 for 4 is not bad, right?
It's mixed news, and yet that's pretty much right on the average, right, for chick survival. And so, these chicks are small and they're dark, and there's an awful lot of things that will eat a loon chick if they can get it. And again, that includes an eagle. It could also include a snapping turtle or a large fish. And so there's an awful lot of things that can happen with a loon chick, but a 3 out of 4 survival rate is again right on the average, and we're going to consider that pretty good. So our loon cups are 3/4 full as we hear that news, I think.
And I have one more question in Zoom, and it's actually for John Rockwood. John, I don't know if we have your audio now. Hopefully we do. But folks were admiring your video, and especially the underwater video, and wondering what you used to shoot that underwater video. Shoot, it looks like we still don't have your audio, but we do have the email of the person who sent in that question. So I'd be glad to put you guys in touch after the meeting.
Great. All right, we'll have to do a postmortem on what happened with John Rockwood's audio. I still feel good though about being able to see those beautiful photos and the beautiful videos as well. I guess that may, conclude our annual meeting. It concludes the last of our Thursday night nature talk series for this year. And as Tom and Bob and Glenn all had mentioned, I just want to thank everybody for their support in so many ways, whether that's volunteering to help us out with our loons, showing any piece of kindness to our field biologists as they're in there in the field, helping, of course, with your memberships and donations. We could not do this work without you. We could not have achieved a really very good year for loons without your help. And so thank you all for doing that. For helping us, and hopefully you will stay with us as we complete this job of recovering our loon population here in New Hampshire. And I look forward to good years ahead for these loons. So thank you all. And I guess that's going to be it for us. So good night to everybody.